Hello, curious minds. Welcome to this intellectual journey. Today, we won't be studying a rigid philosophical system or an immovable doctrine. Today, we're going to meet a man who, enclosed in his tower, decided to undertake the most difficult task of all, to know himself in order to understand humanity. We're talking about Michel de Montaigne, the father of the modern essay, and one of the most fascinating figures of the French Renaissance. His thought is a balm against fanaticism and an invitation to tolerance that resonates with astonishing force in our 21st century. Before we begin, a brief note. To bring this narration to life, I've used artificial intelligence tools to generate the images you see. Think of them as a canvas, a way to illustrate the ideas and the atmosphere of what we're discussing. They won't always be a literal representation, but a visual accompaniment to let your imagination soar with me. I sincerely hope you enjoy it. To understand Montaigne, we must first place him in his context. France, in the second half of the 16th century, was a nightmare scenario. The wars of religion between Catholics and Protestants were bleeding the country dry. Intolerance reigned and neighbors killed each other over dogmatic differences. Amidst this chaos of murderous certainties, Montaigne makes a radical decision. In the year 1571, at the age of 38, he decides to withdraw from public life. He secludes himself in the tower of his castle in Dordogne to devote himself to study and contemplation. But who was this man before he ascended his tower? Michel was born into a wealthy family of ennobled merchants. His education was a unique pedagogical experiment. His father, an eccentric man, decided that Latin should be his native tongue, so no one spoke to him in French until he was 6 years old. Imagine growing up hearing only Latin, even from the servants. This gave Montaigne direct, almost visceral access to the Roman classics. Seneca, Plutarch, and Cicero weren't ancient texts to him. They were his roommates, his natural interlocutors since childhood. After studying law and working as a magistrate in Bordeaux, Montaigne felt exhausted by bureaucracy and social hypocrisy. His retreat was not a cowardly escape, but a quest for freedom. He wanted to reclaim ownership of himself, a Stoic concept that would become central to his life. In his library, he had Greek and Latin maxims inscribed on the ceiling beams, phrases that recalled human fragility and ignorance. Look up with your imagination. There you'd read, "I am human, and nothing human is alien to me," or biblical quotes about vanity. It is here that a new way of writing is born. Montaigne doesn't want to write a systematic treatise on philosophy. He doesn't claim to possess truth with a capital T. He begins to write essays. In French, the verb essayer means to try, to test, to grope. This is revolutionary. The essay is, by definition, an attempt. It is the exercise of testing one's own judgment on any subject. One day he writes about cannibals, another about smells, another about friendship, or about how to educate children. There is no order, only the flow of his thought. The most surprising thing is his object of study. In the notice to the reader, Montaigne tells us with complete honesty, "I myself am the matter of my book." Never before had anyone dedicated thousands of pages to analyzing their own whims, their doubts, their kidney pains, and their favorite foods. This might seem like narcissism, but it isn't. Montaigne discovers that by observing himself with total sincerity, he is observing all of humanity. Every man bears in himself the entire form of the human condition. By speaking of himself, he speaks of us, of our own contradictions. His style is conversational. Reading Montaigne is like sitting by the fire with a wise and somewhat rambling friend. He jumps from one idea to another, quotes a Latin poet, tells a personal anecdote, and then throws out a profound philosophical question. It's the stream of consciousness before the term even existed. But behind this apparent lightness, there is rigorous philosophical evolution. Scholars often divide his thought into three stages, though they intertwine. The first is Stoic, influenced by Seneca. Here, Montaigne is obsessed with death and firmness of character. In this early stage, he writes that to philosophize is to learn how to die. He believes we must constantly prepare for the end, harden ourselves against pain. Death is everywhere, and the wise must live anticipating it so as not to fear it. This is a rigid Montaigne, seeking control. However, something changes. Around the year 1576, he enters a skeptical crisis. He realizes that human reason is fallible, weak, and presumptuous. He adopts a scale as his motto and the phrase "que sais-je," which means, "What do I know?" This "what do I know?" is not nihilistic negation. It is active doubt. It is the suspension of judgment. Montaigne realizes that dogmatists, those who believe they possess absolute truth, are the ones burning people at the stake. Doubt is the antidote to violence. In his famous essay, Apology for Raymond Sebon, Montaigne dismantles human vanity. He asks us, why do we believe ourselves superior to animals? Do they not show intelligence, empathy, and communication? Humans are just one more creature, not the center of the universe. There's a delightful anecdote where he says, When I play with my cat, who knows if she is not amusing herself with me more than I with her? This inversion of perspective is brilliant. It forces us to step down from our pedestal and acknowledge the limits of our minds. Montaigne shows us that our senses deceive us and our reason is colored by emotions, prejudices, and customs. What is true on one side of the Pyrenees is false on the other side. Truth seems to depend on geography and culture, not an immutable universal law. This idea leads us to his cultural relativism, expounded in the essay Of Cannibals. In his time, Europeans were discovering America and judging indigenous peoples as savages. Montaigne, with centuries ahead lucidity, reverses the judgment. He says, "We call barbarism that which is not of our custom." He argues that Europeans, with their inquisitorial tortures and religious wars, are far more barbaric than tribes who eat human flesh for ritual. It's a fierce critique of Eurocentrism. For Montaigne, custom is a second nature. We become accustomed to our ideas and believe them to be natural laws. His skeptical method involves traveling, reading, and conversing to break that bubble of custom and understand that there are 1,000 ways to be human. Let's now turn to a fundamental pillar of his life, friendship. Montaigne had a deep spiritual connection with Étienne de la Boétie, another brilliant thinker who died young. His loss left an immense void in Montaigne, a hole that perhaps the essays tried to fill. Describing this perfect friendship, Montaigne writes one of the most beautiful phrases in literature. "If I am forced to say why I loved him, I feel that it can only be expressed by answering, because it was he, because it was I." An inexplicable and mystical union. After the death of his friend and his father, and after overcoming his stoic and skeptical phases, Montaigne enters a third stage, more Epicurean and naturalist. He begins to reconcile with his body. He no longer wants to fight against nature, he wants to flow with it. This stage is marked by a painful illness, kidney stones, which he called the stone sickness. His father had died of the same thing. Montaigne suffered terrible colics, urinated stones, and lived with intermittent pain that could kill him at any moment. Curiously, physical pain didn't embitter him. On the contrary, it made him love moments of health even more. He said that when the pain ceased, he felt immense pleasure, a joy in simply not hurting. He learned to listen to his body and to distrust the doctors of his era. Montaigne fiercely criticizes the medicine of his time, which often killed more than it cured with its purges and bloodletting. He preferred to let nature take its course. "Sickness is an experience of life," he said, "and we must learn to live with it without panic." In this maturity, his view of death changes. It's no longer learning to die like the Stoics. Now he thinks that death is just an instant, the end of life, not its goal. Obsessing over it is to ruin life. It's better to let nature guide us when the time comes. Wisdom for the mature Montaigne consists of knowing how to live in the present. "When I dance, when I sleep, he writes. It seems simple, but our minds are often in the past or the future, full of anxiety, missing the only reality that exists, the now. He also reflects deeply on education in his essay Of the Education of Children. He criticizes rote learning that fills the head with facts without comprehension. He prefers a well-made head to a well-filled head. The goal of education is not to raise armchair scholars, but to form judgment. The child must learn to doubt, to test, to not accept authority just because. They must harden their body and soul to face the world. It is an active and humanistic pedagogy. Montaigne also speaks to us of solitude, but not a sad solitude, rather the ability to be at peace with oneself. He calls this having a back room in the soul, a private place where we are truly free and where society cannot enter. In society, we wear masks. We play roles, the father, the citizen, the professional. Montaigne doesn't say we should reject these roles, but that we must know how to distinguish the mask from the skin. We must not confuse our public office with our intimate self. This distinction is crucial for moral integrity. We can fulfill our social duties without selling our conscience. Montaigne himself was mayor of Bordeaux twice, and he carried out his duty with moderation, trying to maintain peace without fanaticism. His political management was an example of his philosophy. In the midst of civil wars, he tried to be a mediator. He was not interested in glory or monuments. He was interested in ensuring that the city didn't burn down and that people could sleep peacefully. Pragmatic and humane politics. As he ages, his essays become more and more physical. He talks about his culinary tastes, how he likes wine, how he prefers a hard mattress to a soft one. He champions the body as an essential part of human dignity. We are not angels, we are rational animals. This total acceptance of the human condition is what makes him so modern. He doesn't try to be a saint or a hero. He tries to be a man loyal to himself. The greatness of soul is not so much in moving upward and forward, as in knowing how to order and circumscribe oneself. Montaigne travels to Italy in search of relief for his kidneys in thermal spas. He writes a travel journal that was not intended for publication. There we see Montaigne the tourist, curious about hydraulic machines, exotic foods, and local customs. The fascinating thing is that he travels without prejudice. Unlike other French people who complain that there's no French food, Montaigne adapts. I make the diversity of customs a pleasure, not a problem. He is the first modern cosmopolitan in the fullest sense. Let's return to his book. The essays were never finished. He constantly corrected and expanded them. In the margins of his copies, he wrote new notes. The book grew with him. If he changed, the book changed. It is a living, organic work in perpetual construction. There is a brutal honesty in admitting that one changes one's mind. Montaigne doesn't erase what he wrote before, he simply adds what he thinks now. He shows us the geological layers of his mind. He teaches us that contradiction is part of being alive and thinking. He criticizes those who claim to know everything about God's will. For him, theology is slippery ground. He is a faithful Catholic, but he considers faith a gift, not a product of reason. His skepticism protects faith by separating it from rational arrogance. This bothered the Church at the time, and his book was included in the Index of Forbidden Books almost 1 century after his death. But in his lifetime, Montaigne evaded censorship thanks to his ability to say perhaps, and it seems to me, instead of this is so. His legacy is incalculable. Descartes would take his skepticism as a starting point, though to arrive at a certainty that Montaigne would reject. Pascal would be obsessed with him, debating with his shadow. Shakespeare read his essays, and it shows in Hamlet's introspection. But beyond academic philosophy, Montaigne is the grandfather of bloggers, columnists, of anyone who writes in the first person to explore the world. He validated subjective experience as a legitimate and valuable source of knowledge. Let's talk about his relationship with women. Although a man of his time, he had an intellectual disciple, Marie de Gournay, who edited his posthumous work. She was one of the first feminists and defended the legacy of her adoptive father with fierce passion. In his later years, Montaigne reflects on old age. He neither idealizes nor detests it, he observes it. He notes how his memory fails, how his body wrinkles, and he writes about it. It is time to leave life, as one leaves a banquet, giving thanks and without making a fuss. One of his most potent ideas is the critique of cruelty. Montaigne hated cruelty above all vices. In an era where torture was legal and public, he expressed his physical horror at the suffering of others. The pain of others hurts me. This sensibility is the basis of his humanism. It is not a humanism that deifies man, but one that pities him. We are vulnerable beings prone to error and pain. That is why we must be kind to one another. Tolerance is born from our shared fragility. Montaigne teaches us to distrust the grand words that justify slaughter, honor, glory, faith, homeland. He prefers small words: bread, sleep, conversation, garden. Real life happens in the details, not in grand ideological abstractions. There's a passage where he says that even on the highest throne in the world, we are still only sitting on our own rear ends. It's a vulgar and brilliant way to remind us of our physical reality. No matter how much power you have, you're still a limited biological animal. This reminder is vital today, in the era of social media and the projection of perfect lives. Montaigne would tell us, show your cracks, show your doubts. That's what makes you interesting and real. Perfection is boring and inhuman. The lifestyle he proposes is not one of asceticism. He enjoyed sex, food, reading, but all in moderation, not out of imposed moral virtue, but because excess eventually causes pain. It is an intelligent and calculated hedonism. His library, that round tower, had 3 floors. The chapel downstairs, the bedroom in the middle, and the library upstairs. It was his kingdom. From there he could see his house and his lands, but he was separated from them. He was in the world, but not of the world. Sometimes we wonder why we should read a 16th century Frenchman. The answer is that Montaigne is our contemporary. His problems are ours: the search for identity, the fear of death, living with those who think differently. He doesn't give us recipes for happiness. He distrusts gurus. What he gives us is company. Reading the essays is feeling that we're not crazy for having contradictory thoughts. It's validating our inner complexity. Montaigne died in 1592 in his bed, listening to Mass. He died peacefully, having accepted his destiny. His life had no great epic battles, but his inner battle, the conquest of his own mind, was a heroic feat. Now let's delve a little into his writing technique. He said his thought was rambling. He wrote in leaps and bounds. This fragmentary structure is very similar to how we actually think. We don't think in straight lines, we think in a web. This makes opening the essays to any page a pleasure. You don't need to read them in order. It's a book to dip into, to consult in moments of doubt. It's a pharmacy for the soul, where each essay is a different remedy. Montaigne valued diligent negligence. He wrote as if he didn't care, but he corrected a lot. He sought a natural style, one that spoke like people on the street, but with the depth of the classics. He hated affectation and bombastic words. His concept of honestete, honesty, integrity, is key. To be an honnête homme didn't just mean not stealing. It meant being cultured yet humble, brave yet prudent, sociable yet independent. It was the ideal of the gentleman who doesn't need to show off. In a world where everyone shouted their truths, Montaigne whispered his doubts. That whisper has crossed the centuries with more force than the shouts of fanatics. Because the shout intimidates, but the whisper invites listening. Think about it for a moment. How many times a day do we act out of inertia or because of what others will say? Montaigne invites us to stop and ask, am I doing this because I want to or because it's custom? It's an invitation to radical authenticity. And that authenticity includes accepting our ignorance. Saying, I don't know, is an act of intellectual bravery. In a meeting, in a debate, admitting that we don't have enough data is the first step towards real wisdom. Montaigne is the antidote to imposter syndrome. He, an educated nobleman, confesses that he has a bad memory, that he is lazy, that sometimes he doesn't understand his own books. If Montaigne allows himself to be imperfect, we can too. The literary critic Virginia Woolf said of the essays, "There is an audience, there is a crowd, but there is no judge." Montaigne doesn't judge us. He shows us his flaws so that we feel less alone in ours. It is a literature of compassion. Even on political issues, his moderation is a lesson. In a civil war, moderates are often hated by both sides. Montaigne ran risks by not aligning himself blindly. He teaches us that the center is not lukewarmness. Sometimes it is the most dangerous and courageous position. His view of history is also skeptical. He doesn't believe in inevitable linear progress. He sees history as a cycle of rises and falls, of repeated follies. This cures us of the arrogance of believing that our era is the pinnacle of civilization. Montaigne reminds us that we are ondoyants et divers, wavering and diverse. We don't have a fixed personality like a rock. We are like water. We change according to the container and the moment. Accepting this fluidity lifts a great weight from us. Returning to his tower, imagine the silence. Only the scratching of the pen and the wind outside. That silence was the laboratory where the modern self was forged. Without that retreat, our understanding of human psychology would be very different today. It's important to note that Montaigne was not a misanthropic hermit. He loved conversation. He said that debate was the most fruitful exercise of the mind, but he preferred a tough, honest debate to polite, false chatter. For him, being contradicted was not an insult, it was an opportunity. When I am contradicted, it awakens my attention, not my anger. If only we could apply this to our social media today, the world would be a better place. Montaigne's legacy reaches even Nietzsche, who said, that such a man has written increases the joy of living on this earth. It reaches Proust in his exploration of memory. It is a golden thread that runs through Western culture. His impact is not just intellectual, it is existential. He teaches us to inhabit our lives, not to always be waiting for the weekend, vacation, or retirement. Life is what happens while you're brushing your teeth or chatting with a neighbor. In the final essay, Of Experience, he summarizes his vital thesis. Our great and glorious masterpiece is to live appropriately. Not to write books, not to win battles, not to accumulate gold, to live. With attention, with gratitude, with acceptance. Montaigne brings philosophy down from the heavens of Platonic ideas and places it on earth, in the kitchen, in the bedroom. He makes it domestic. He tells us that wisdom doesn't require a toga, it can be worn in pajamas. So what's the big lesson? Perhaps it's that there is no single big lesson, that life is a mosaic of small lessons, contradictions, and moments, and that it's okay not to have all the answers. Michel de Montaigne was the explorer of his own inner continent. By mapping his soul, he gave us the map to explore our own. He gave us permission to be human, fallible, and free. And for that, 400 years later, he remains our friend. I hope this journey through Montaigne's mind has inspired you to look in the mirror with more kindness and curiosity, to doubt a little more and judge a little less, to enjoy the simple fact of being here now. Thank you for joining me on this audio-visual essay. It has been a pleasure to share these reflections with you. Philosophy is alive as long as we keep asking questions. If this video has made you think, subscribe and hit the bell. Leave me a comment. What do you know for certain, or what doubt keeps you up at night? I'd love to read your thoughts. Until next time, Seekers.